So for gasoline and air, it's about 1.3% to 6%. This will burn well. Now, if you're close to 6%, you got a lot of fuel. That will burn a little bit better than the 1.3, but nevertheless, past 1.6, you're really going to have too much fuel. There's not going to be enough oxygen to mix with it, and it'll actually go out. So, and you also need the heat, because not only to ignite it for the initial activation energy, you also need to continue the flame to keep the activation energy there, so it'll keep burning and burning as long as you have your fuel and your oxygen. There are some fires that start when you don't even expect them, like smoldering coals. Like it was mentioned, charcoal can glow. That's because it is actually reacting and it is producing heat. It is often found in, and for example, if you like to take these charcoal and you squirt lighter fluid on it, that'll ignite. That'll certainly ignite, because the coals are still glowing. They're still producing heat. They are still burning. They don't burn with a flame, but they still burn. You see them glowing, then they are still burning. Forest fires actually happen. A lot of them happen because of this. People think that they put out the fire, like they have a campfire, and the fire, the fuel is pretty much done. There's no more branches on the fire. You see some embers there, and they think, okay, well, there's no flame, so the fire this is harmless. We can walk away. But even though this is the embers, the glowing wood, you know what they are, the red, the orange, yellow glowing wood, they are still hot enough. They're still reacting. They are still hot enough to produce a fire. So all it takes maybe would be, let's say, the wind stirring up a lot of oxygen nearby to cause the flame, or maybe something like a very dry leaf that's easily ignitable, and then it can touch these embers, and that'll start a fire. And this can burn through an entire forest. So it's important for campers to realize this, that a fire must be completely and totally out, completely buried, flooded with water. You should see no glowing embers at all. There's also the idea of some spontaneous combustion. The sun's heat, this really doesn't have much in the winter when there's not much sun, but anyway, the sun's heat, the sun can make the ground hot, combined with bacterial growth and wet stuff, wet vegetation, wet hay, even manure. There's bacteria there. As bacteria grow, believe it or not, their growth is also an exothermic, in their growth, they have a lot of reactions, and they are exothermic. They will actually heat up whatever is around them. So if we have the sun hitting, let's say, wet hay, this happens. This does happen, and it's something that farmers, let's say, that have to deal with wet hay, or hay and wet hay. They have to know about this, and most of them do. I'm hoping. Anyway, so we have this wet hay. The bacteria are all over the hay, and it's wet. So they're happy with the water, and they grow. The sun gets on the wet hay. The sun heats it up. Now, it might not heat it up to the level of to the ignition temperature, but because there's also bacterial growth over there, bacterial growth adds heat. So the bacterial growth, together with the sun's heat, can actually make it reach the temperature where it'll burst into fire. And that is called spontaneous combustion. It does happen. And mentioned this is especially true if they're oily rags, because these burn at a lower temperature than, let's say, wood. So they got to be careful. If there's bacterial growth around, like something's wet and bacteria grow there, and it's in the sun, got to watch out. These things can combust by themselves. In case you're interested, I mentioned manure. Bacteria grow in manure, and they produce plenty of heat. Now you might think, how much heat can they produce? Back in the Middle Ages, and as far as I know, it might even be going on today, people who were poverty-stricken and had no home. And in the winter, they might get, the cold might even cause them to die. If people were poor enough and they were weak enough. But what they knew is that if they went to, let's say, where the pigs deposited all their manure, and they would lie down in the manure all night, the manure was actually warm and warmed them up because of all the bacterial growth which was exothermic and produced heat and enabled them to live. Let's move on. So we understand about how fires happen and why they burn, but how do they spread? And this is very important because it's the spreading of fires that cause most of the damage. Just for lighting a match and throwing it on the floor, if it didn't spread, wouldn't be much of a problem. Anyway, so we have to know how fires spread. One way is conduction. This goes through solids. Now, this is the most common way, or at least most commonly understood way. When you burn like one part of the wood, the rest of the wood will burn also. Now, what we have to be careful about is that it's not just the wood that because it's a fuel it burns. We're talking about how fires can spread quickly or spread faster than just like burning one edge of the paper and have it eventually get to the other edge of the paper. That's the obvious one. We're talking about conduction let's talk about conduction in a different way you might not have thought. When you heat up, let's say part of the house, and there's a metal pipe going in from that side part of the house to another part of the house. Let's say here's where the fire is, and we have a metal pipe going from there to another part of the house, and here's where you have, you have a bed over here somewhere. Anyway, so if the fire is on this part of the house, this metal pipe will get hot. Now, metal conducts heat. Solids conduct heat, especially metals. This metal pipe, if heated hot enough by this fire over here, will conduct the heat here to this part of the room, or as far as I know, even a different room, and actually cause this bed to get inflamed, to become inflamed and to burst into flames because of the heat based from this metal pipe. The metal conducts heat. If this is hot enough, the metal will conduct heat all the way to a different place. It's true for metal pipes, even for nails. Often going through, let's say there's like a metal nail going from this floor to the bottom floor. You can somehow see strange things. A fire started here, but somehow a fire also started here, and the question is, how is that possible? If the fire, let's say the fire was automatically started by a space heater over here. So this room had a space heater. How in the world did the fire get to here? Suddenly, there's fire over here, and it got here. The answer is we have to look for these metal things or anything that will conduct heat. This is often something that happens and causes false arson accusations. Because what does an arsonist want to do? They want to burn down the whole building. So they're going to start a fire in this room. They'll go to this room. They'll start a fire in this room. So a sign of arson is separate fires started in separate places. Now, here's a case that we just talked about. You have a fire in one room that might have been caused by a space heater. And the forensic arson investigators, they say, hey, there's a fire started in this room. And you know something? I noticed that there's a separate fire started in this room. Must be there was an arsonist. He went to this room, and then he went to this room, and he started two fires. But that's not necessarily true. They've got to recognize that there may be some metal connecting thing, and that metal heated up and started fire in the other room and made it look like there were two separate fire origin places, when really they weren't. This is a very important thing. Fire also starts with radiation. Let's say again, assuming there's a fire over here, and here you have, let's say, a comfortable fluffy chair that's easily burnable. So the fire starts over here. What happens is, not only does it raise the temperature around itself, it will also radiate using, believe it or not, it's they produce light. They also produce radiation, not in the visible range, but in the infrared range. This radiation, of course, radiates out in all directions, and it can heat up things around it. That's why there's a fire in this part of the room. Something in this part of them can suddenly burst into flames. The temperature rose high enough because of all the radiation of infrared radiation it's radiating out. We can't